Chapter 1. Rule number 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. How often do you think about lobsters? If you are like most people, you only think about them when you're eating one. Lobsters have more in common with you than you might think. Lobsters live on the ocean floor. They need a home base down there, a range within which they hunt for prey and scavenge around for stray edible bits and pieces of whatever rains down from the continual chaos of carnage and death far above. They want somewhere secure, where the hunting and the gathering is good. They want a home. This can present a problem since there are many lobsters. What if two of them occupy the same territory, at the bottom of the ocean, at the same time, and both want to live there? What if there are hundreds of lobsters all trying to make a living and raise a family in the same crowded patch of sand and refuse? Over the millennia, animals who must cohabit with others in the same territories have, in consequence, learned many tricks to establish dominance, while risking the least amount of possible damage. A defeated wolf, for example, will roll over on its back, exposing its throat to the victor, who will not then deign to tear it out. Lobsters often encounter one another when out exploring. When such happens, a lobster may decide to retreat and avoid confrontation. But in the aftermath of a losing battle, a vanquished competitor loses confidence, sometimes for days. Sometimes the defeat can have even more severe consequences. If a dominant lobster is badly defeated, its brain basically dissolves. Then it grows a new subordinate brain, one more appropriate to its new, lowly position. Serotonin is the chemical that governs posture and escape in the lobster. Low-ranking lobsters produce comparatively low levels of serotonin. This is also true of low-ranking human beings. Low serotonin means decreased confidence. Low serotonin means less happiness, more pain and anxiety, more illness and a shorter lifespan. Among humans, just as among crustaceans. Keep this in mind. High levels of serotonin and low levels of octopamine make lobster a cocky, strutting, much less likely to back down when challenged. Higher spots in the dominance hierarchy and the higher serotonin levels typical of those who inhabit them are characterized by less illness, misery, and death, even when factors such as absolute income or number of decaying food scraps are held constant. The importance of this can hardly be overstated. Think about this. To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with your eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. It means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood, where finitude and mortality are only dimly comprehended. So attend carefully to your posture. Quit drooping and hunching around. Speak your mind. Put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. Walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Dare to be dangerous. Encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neural pathways desperate for its calming influence. Did you know? Lobsters have been around for more than 350 million years. Chapter 2. Rule number 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Imagine that someone receives an organ transplant. Imagine it's a kidney. A transplant typically occurs only after a long period of anxious waiting on the part of the recipient. Only a minority of people donate organs when they die, and even fewer when they are still alive. And even a smaller number of donated organs are a good match for any hopeful recipient. This means that the typical kidney transplantee has been undergoing dialysis, the only alternative, for years. Dialysis involves passing all the patient's blood out of his or her body through a machine and back in. It is an unlikely and miraculous treatment, so that's all good, but it's not pleasant. It must happen 5 to 7 times a week for 8 hours at a time. It should happen every time the patient sleeps. That's too much. No one wants to stay on dialysis. Now, one of the complications of transplantation is rejection. Your body does not like it when parts of someone else's body are stitched into it. To stop this from happening, you must take anti-rejection drugs, which weaken immunity, increasing your susceptibility to infectious disease. Most people are happy to accept the trade-off. Recipients of transplants still suffer the effects of organ rejection, despite the existence and utility of these drugs. It's not because the drugs fail, although sometimes they do. It's more often because those prescribed the drugs do not take them. This beggars belief. It is seriously not good to have your kidneys fail. Dialysis is no picnic. Transplantation surgery occurs after long waiting at high risk and great expense. To lose all that because you don't take your medication? How could people do that to themselves? To suffer terribly and to know yourself as the cause, that is hell. Jordan B. Peterson. It's complicated, to be fair. Many people who receive a transplanted organ are isolated or beset by multiple physical health problems. They may be cognitively impaired or depressed. They may not entirely trust their doctor or understand the necessity of the medication. Maybe they can barely afford the drugs and ration them, desperately and unproductively. But imagine that it isn't you who feels sick. It's your dog. So you take him to the vet. The vet gives you a prescription, thus you care. Always remember, people are better at filling and properly administering prescription medication to their pets than to themselves. That's not good. Even from your pet's perspective, it's not good. Your pet probably loves you and would be happier if you took your medication. People appear to love their dogs, cats, ferrets, and birds more than themselves. How horrible is that? A reminder, start with yourself. Take care of yourself. Define who you are. Refine your personality. Choose your destination and articulate your being. As the great 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche so brilliantly noted, he whose life has a why can bear almost any how. Begin by treating yourself as if you were someone you were responsible for helping. Did you know? You must keep the promises you make to yourself and reward yourself so that you can trust and motivate yourself. You need to determine how to act toward yourself so that you are most likely to become and to stay a good person. Chapter 3. Rule number 3, make friends with people who want the best for you. If you have a friend whose relationship you wouldn't recommend to your father, son, or your sister, why keep such a friend to yourself? Keep friends whose friendship meant well for you, who want things to be better and not worse. It is a good thing, not a selfish act, to choose people who are good for you. It is appropriate to associate with people whose lives would be improved if they saw your life improve. Remember, when you dare aspire upward, you reveal the inadequacy of the present and the promise of the future. It is not easier to surround yourself with people who want the best for you, good, healthy people, than bad, unhealthy people. It requires strength and great daring to stand up near such a person. Develop some courage, use your judgment, and protect yourself from too uncritical compassion and pity. Rule number 4. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. No matter how good you are at something or how you rank your accomplishments, there is someone out there who makes you look incompetent. You're a decent guitar player, but you're not Jimmy Page or Jack White. You're almost certainly not even going to rock your local pub. You're a good cook, but there are many great chefs. Your mother's recipe for fish heads and rice, no matter how celebrated in her village of origin, doesn't cut it in these days of grapefruit foam and Scotch tobacco ice cream. Inside us dwells a critical internal voice and spirit that knows all this. It's predisposed to make its noisy case. It condemns our mediocre efforts. It can be very difficult to quell. Worse, critics of its sort are necessary. There is no shortage of tasteless artists, tuneless musicians, poisonous cooks, bureaucratically personality-disordered middle managers, hack novelists, and tedious ideology-ridden professors. Humans are not equal in ability or outcome, and never will be. Jordan B. Peterson. A very small number of people produce very much of everything. People are unhappy at the bottom. They get sick there and remain unknown and unloved. They waste their lives there. They die there. Something to consider. The winners don't take all, but they take most, and the bottom is not a good place to be. In consequence, the self-denigrating voice in the minds of people weaves a devastating tale. Life is a zero-sum game. Worthlessness is the default condition. But what willful blindness could possibly shelter people from such withering criticism? It is for such reasons that a whole generation of social psychologists recommended positive illusions as the only reliable route to mental health. Here is an alternative approach, and one that requires no illusions. If the cards are always stacked against you, perhaps the game you are playing is somehow rigged, perhaps by you, unbeknownst to yourself. If the internal voice makes you doubt the value of your endeavors, or your life, or life itself, perhaps you should stop listening. If the critical voice within says the same denigrating things about everyone, no matter how successful, how reliable can it be? Maybe its comments are chatter, not wisdom. Did you know? Talking yourself into irrelevance is not a profound critique of being. It's a cheap trick of the rational mind. Chapter 4. Rule number 5, do not let your children do something that makes you dislike them. Statistically speaking, 2-year-olds are the most violent of people. They kick, hit, and bite, and they steal the property of others. They do so to explore, to express outrage and frustration, and to gratify their impulsive desires. More importantly, for our purposes, they do so to discover the true limits of permissible behavior. How else are they ever going to puzzle out what is acceptable? Infants are like blind people searching for a wall. They have to push forward and test to see where the actual boundaries lie. Kids do this frequently. Scared parents think that a crying child is always sad or hurt. This is simply not true. Consider that anger is one of the most common reasons for crying in children. Careful analysis of the musculature patterns of crying children has confirmed this. Anger crying and fear or sadness crying do not look the same. They also don't sound the same and can be distinguished with careful attention. Anger crying is often an act of dominance and should be dealt with as such. The following are general principles of discipline. Number 1, limit the rules. Here are some examples of simple rules for kids. Do not bite, kick, or hit except in self-defense. Do not torture and bully other children so you don't end up in jail. Eat in a civilized and thankful manner so that people are happy to have you at their house and pleased to feed you. Learn to share so other kids will play with you. Pay attention when spoken to by adults so they don't hate you and might teach you something. Go to sleep properly and peacefully so that your parents can have a private life and not resent your existence. Take care of your belongings because you need to learn how and because you're lucky to have them. A child who knows these rules will be welcome everywhere. Number 2, use minimum necessary force. This must be established experimentally, starting with the smallest possible intervention. Some children will be turned to stone by a glare. A verbal command will stop another. A thumb-cocked flick of the index finger on a small hand might be necessary for some. Such a strategy is particularly useful in public places such as restaurants. It can be administered suddenly, quietly, and effectively without risking escalation. Note this. An angry child should sit by himself until he calms down. Then he should be allowed to return to normal life. That means the child wins instead of his anger. Number 3, parents should come in pairs. It's easy for a parent to make a mistake. Insomnia, hunger, the aftermath of an argument, a hangover, a bad day at work. Any of these things singly can make a person unreasonable, while in combination they can produce someone dangerous. Raising young children is demanding and exhausting. It is necessary to have someone else around, to observe and step in and discuss. This will make it less likely that a whiny, provocative child and her fed-up, cranky parent will excite each other to the point of no return. Did you know? According to literature, if a child has not been taught to behave properly by the age of 4, it will forever be difficult for him or her to make friends. Chapter 5. Rule number 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. One of the most vengeful murderers of the 20th century, the terrible Karl Panzram, was raped, brutalized, and betrayed in the Minnesota institution responsible for his rehabilitation when he was a delinquent juvenile. He emerged enraged beyond measure as a burglar, arsonist, rapist, and serial killer. He aimed consciously and consistently at destruction, even keeping track of the dollar value of the property he burned. Panzram's response was perfectly understandable. The details of his autobiography reveal that he was a powerful, consistent, fearless actor. He had the courage of his convictions. How could someone like him be expected to forgive and forget, given what had happened to him? Truly terrible things happen to people. It's no wonder they're out for revenge. Under such conditions, vengeance seems a moral necessity. Consider this. A hurricane is an act of God, but failure to prepare when the necessity for preparation is well known, that's sin. It is also possible to learn good by experiencing evil. A bullied boy can mimic his tormentors, but he can also learn from his own abuse that it is wrong to push people around and make their lives miserable. After 20 generations, more than 10 billion people would have suffered childhood abuse, more people than currently inhabit the planet. But instead, abuse disappears across generations. People constrain its spread. That's a testament to the genuine dominance of good over evil in the human heart. Alexander Solzhenitsyn had every reason to question the structure of existence when he was imprisoned in a Soviet labor camp in the middle of the 20th century. He had served as a soldier on the ill-prepared Russian front lines in the face of a Nazi invasion. He had been arrested, beaten, and thrown into prison by his own people. Then he was struck by cancer. He could have become resentful and bitter. His life had been rendered miserable by both Stalin and Hitler, two of the worst tyrants in history. He lived in brutal conditions. Vast stretches of his precious time were stolen from him and squandered. He witnessed the pointless and degrading suffering and death of his friends and acquaintances. Then he contracted an extremely serious disease. Solzhenitsyn had cause to curse God. Job himself barely had it as hard. But the great writer, the profound, spirited defender of truth, did not allow his mind to turn toward vengeance and destruction. He opened his eyes instead. During his many trials, Solzhenitsyn encountered people who comported themselves nobly under horrific circumstances. He contemplated their behavior deeply. Then he asked himself the most difficult of questions. Had he personally contributed to the catastrophe of his life? If so, how? Solzhenitsyn pored over the details of his life with a fine-toothed comb. He asked himself a second question and a third. Can I stop making such mistakes now? Can I repair the damage done by my past failures now? He learned to watch and to listen. He took himself apart piece by piece, let what was unnecessary and harmful die, and resurrected himself. Then he wrote the Gulag Archipelago, a history of the Soviet prison camp system. One man's decision to change his life instead of cursing fate shook the whole pathological system of communist tyranny to its core. It crumbled entirely not so many years later. Did you know? Solzhenitsyn is not the only one reported in history that did not allow his mind to turn towards vengeance and destruction. Václav Havel, the persecuted writer who later impossibly became the president of Czechoslovakia, then of the new Czech Republic, comes to mind, as well as Mahatma Gandhi. Chapter 6, Rule Number 7, Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Sharing does not mean giving away valuables without getting anything in return. This is what every child who refuses to share fears it means. Sharing simply means to initiate the process of trade. A child who can share, who can trade, can have any friends because friendship is a form of trade. Over the years, people have watched the successful succeed and the unsuccessful fail over and over again and have drawn a conclusion. The successful among us delay gratification. The successful among us bargain with the future. A great idea begins to emerge, taking ever more clearly articulated form, in ever more clearly articulated stories. What's the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful? The successful sacrifice. Things get better as the successful practice their sacrifices. A point to consider. If the world you are seeing is not the world you want, it's time to examine your values. It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. It's time to let go. It might even be time to sacrifice what you love best so that you can become who you might become instead of staying who you are. Thus, the person who wishes to alleviate suffering, who wishes to rectify the flaws in being, who wants to bring about the best of all possible futures, who wants to create heaven on earth, will make the greatest of sacrifices, of self and child, of everything that is loved, to live a life aimed at the good. He will forego expediency. He will pursue the path of ultimate meaning. And he will, in that manner, bring salvation to the ever-desperate world. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Carl Jung. Rule number 8. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. At the beginning of time, according to the great Western tradition, the Word of God transformed chaos into being through the act of speech. It is axiomatic within that tradition that men and women alike are made in the image of that God. We also transform chaos into being through speech. We transform the manifold possibilities of the future into the actualities of past and present. A reminder, to tell the truth is to bring the most habitable reality into being. Truth builds edifices that can stand 1,000 years. Truth feeds and clothes the poor and makes nations wealthy and safe. Truth reduces the terrible complexity of a man to the simplicity of his word, so that he can become a partner rather than an enemy. Truth makes the past truly past and makes the best use of the future's possibilities. Truth is the ultimate, inexhaustible natural resource. It's the light in the darkness. See the truth, tell the truth. And remember, the truth will not come in the guise of opinion shared by others, as the truth is neither a collection of slogans nor an ideology. It will instead be personal. Your truth is something only you can tell, based as it is on the unique circumstances of your life. Apprehend your personal truth. Communicate it carefully in an articulate manner to yourself and others. This will ensure your security and your life more abundantly now, while you inhabit the structure of your current beliefs. This will ensure the benevolence of the future, diverging as it might from the certainties of the past. A point to consider? Apprehend your personal truth. Did you know? The truth will keep your soul from withering and dying while you encounter the inevitable tragedy of life. It will help you avoid the terrible desire to seek vengeance for that tragedy. Part of the terrible sin of being, which everything must bear gracefully just so it can exist. Chapter 7. Rule number 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what someone genuinely means when they are talking. This is because often they are articulating their ideas for the first time. They can't do it without wandering down blind alleys or making contradictory or even nonsensical claims. This is partly because talking and thinking is often more about forgetting than about remembering. To discuss an event, particularly something emotional like a death or serious illness, is to slowly choose what to leave behind. To begin with, however, much that is not necessary must be put into words. The emotion-laden speaker must recount the whole experience in detail. Only then can the central narrative, cause and consequence, come into focus or consolidate itself. Only then can the moral of the story be derived. Imagine that someone holds a stack of $100 bills, some of which are counterfeit. All the bills might have to be spread on a table so that each can be seen, and any differences noted before the genuine can be distinguished from the false. This is the sort of methodical approach you have to take when really listening to someone trying to solve a problem or communicate something important. If upon learning that some of the bills are counterfeit, you too casually dismiss all of them, as you would if you were in a hurry or otherwise unwilling to put in the effort, The person will never learn to separate the wheat from the chaff. So remember, if you listen without premature judgment, people will generally tell you everything they are thinking and with very little deceit. People will tell you the most amazing, absurd, interesting things. Very few of your conversations will be boring. Rule number 10. Be precise in your speech. When things break down, what has been ignored rushes in. When things are no longer specified with precision, the walls crumble, and chaos makes its presence known. When we've been careless and let things slide, what we have refused to attend to gathers itself up, adopts a serpentine form, and strikes, often at the worst possible moment. It is then that we see what focused intent, the precision of aim, and careful attention protects us from. Chaos emerges into a household bit by bit. Mutual unhappiness and resentment pile up. Everything untidy is swept under the rug, where the dragon feasts on the crumbs. But no one says anything, as the shared society and negotiated order of the household reveals itself as inadequate or disintegrates, in the face of the unexpected and threatening. Everybody whistles in the dark instead. When you have something to say, silence is a lie. Jordan B. Peterson. Confront the chaos of being. Take aim against the sea of troubles. Specify your destination and chart your course. Admit to what you want. Tell those around you who you are. Narrow and gaze attentively and move forward forthrightly. Be precise in your speech. Did you know? When you're involved in a genuine conversation, you're listening and talking, but mostly listening. Chapter 8. Rule number 11. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding. Skateboarding is dangerous. That's the point. Children want triumph over danger. They would have been safer in protective equipment, but that would have ruined it. They weren't trying to be safe. They were trying to become competent. It is competence that makes people as safe as they can truly be. When given the opportunity, we prefer to live on the edge. There, we can still be both confident in our experience and confronting the chaos that helps us develop. We're hardwired for that reason to enjoy risk. We feel invigorated and excited when we work to optimize our future performance while playing in the present. Otherwise, we lumber around sloth-like, unconscious, unformed, and careless. Overprotected, we will fail when something dangerous, unexpected, and full of opportunity suddenly makes its appearance, as it inevitably will. Boys are suffering in the modern world. They are more disobedient negatively or more independent positively than girls, and they suffer for this throughout their pre-university educational career. They are less agreeable, agreeableness being a personality trait associated with compassion, empathy, and avoidance of conflict, and less susceptible to anxiety and depression, at least after both sexes hit puberty. Girls can win by winning in their own hierarchy, by being good at what girls value as girls. They can add to this victory by winning in the boys' hierarchy. Boys, however, can only win by winning in the male hierarchy. They will lose status among girls and boys by being good at what girls value. It costs them in reputation among the boys and in attractiveness among the girls. It took untold generations to get you where you are. A little gratitude might be in order. If you're going to insist on bending the world to your way, you better have your reasons. Jordan B. Peterson. If women are tough, they want someone tougher. If they're smart, they want someone smarter. They desire someone who brings to the table something they can already provide. Women don't want boys, they want men. They want someone to contend with, someone to grapple with. This often makes it hard for tough, smart, attractive women to find mates. There just aren't that many men around who can outclass them enough to be considered desirable, who are higher, as one research publication put it, in income, education, self-confidence, intelligence, dominance, and social position. If you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. Leave children alone when they are skateboarding. Did you know? Girls aren't attracted to boys who are their friends, even though they might like them, whatever that means. They are attracted to boys who win status contests with other boys. Chapter 9. Rule number 12, pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Dogs are like people. They are the friends and allies of human beings. They are social, hierarchical, and domesticated. They are happy at the bottom of the family pyramid. They pay for the attention they receive with loyalty, admiration, and love. Dogs are great. Cats, however, are their own creatures. They aren't social or hierarchical except in passing. They are only semi-domesticated. They don't do tricks. They are friendly on their own terms. Dogs have been tamed, but cats have made a decision. They appear willing to interact with people for some strange reason on their own. Cats are a manifestation of nature, of being in an almost pure form. Furthermore, they are a form of being that looks at human beings and approves. When you meet a cat on the street, many things can happen. The evil part of you may want to startle it with a loud sound. Front teeth over bottom lip. This will make a nervous cat puff up its fur and stand sideways so it looks larger. But when you have yourself under proper control, you may bend down and call the cat over so you can pet it. Sometimes it will run away. Sometimes it will ignore you completely because it's a cat. But sometimes the cat will come over to you, push its head against your waiting hand and be pleased about it. Sometimes it will even roll over and arch its back against the dusty concrete. Although cats positioned in that manner will often bite and claw even a friendly hand. People are social. People are antisocial. People are social because they like the members of their own group. People are antisocial because they don't like the members of other groups. A fact to consider. If you pay careful attention even on a bad day, you may be fortunate enough to be confronted with small opportunities of just that sort. Maybe you will see a little girl dancing on the street because she's all dressed up in a ballet costume. Maybe you will have a particularly good cup of coffee in a cafe that cares about their customers. Maybe you can steal 10 or 20 minutes to do some little ridiculous thing that distracts you or reminds you that you can laugh at the absurdity of existence. And maybe when you are going for a walk and your head is spinning, a cat will show up. And if you pay attention to it, then you will get a reminder for just 15 seconds that the wonder of being might make up for the ineradicable suffering that accompanies it. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Conclusion. An antidote to chaos indicates clearly that people need ordering principles, and that chaos otherwise beckons. We require rules, standards, values, alone and together. We're pack animals, beasts of burden. We must bear a load to justify our miserable existence. We require routine and tradition. That's order. Order can become excessive and that's not good, but chaos can swamp us so we drown, and that is also not good. We need to stay on the straight and narrow path. Each of the 12 rules of this book and their accompanying essays therefore provide a guide to being there. What shall you do in the next dire moment? Focus your attention on the right move. The flood is coming. The flood is always coming. The apocalypse is always upon us. That's why the story of Noah is archetypal. Things fall apart. Rule 10, be precise in your speech. When everything has become chaotic and uncertain, all that remains to guide you might be the character you constructed previously, by aiming up and concentrating on the moment at hand. If you have failed in that, you will fail in the moment of crisis, and then God help you. Try this. Here are some suggestions to follow when disciplining your child. Do not bite, kick, or hit except in self-defense. Learn to share so other kids will play with you. Pay attention when spoken to by adults, so they don't hate you and might therefore deign to teach you something. Go to sleep properly and peaceably, so that your parents can have a private life and not resent your existence. Take care of your belongings, because you need to learn how and because you're lucky to have them. Be good company when something fun is happening, so that you're invited for the fun. Act so that other people are happy you're around, so that people will want you around. A child who knows these rules will be welcome everywhere.